If I was to show you one of these, a $20 bill, say, what is your view of this particular piece of paper? You know, I could put it maybe a little closer to you and maybe bring it a little bit further, or just take it out of view altogether. And the fact is that most people, even Christian, God's people, they have an improper view of what this is supposed to be. Right now, we are in our Stewardship Emphasis Month. Each and every February, our church just takes a little bit of time to refocus ourselves on things, on what truly matters in our lives when it comes to this matter of money. Now, I understand that a lot of people don't like to speak about this particular topic, and it's a hard topic sometimes to hear because it is something that is so sensitive in our lives. But yet, the Bible has a lot to say about how we are to properly view our finances. This past Sunday, we kicked off our Stewardship Month, and Dr. Paul Chappell was here with us, and in both our Sunday morning and Sunday evening service, he gave us two fantastic sermons from God's Word on this matter of giving and stewardship. And I would invite you that if you missed those services, maybe you weren't here in person or you did not get a chance to join us on live stream, I hope that you'll go back and watch those two services and allow it to do a work in your heart as it certainly did a work in my heart this past Sunday. Over the next 4 weeks, including this week, we'll be talking about this matter of stewardship. Our theme for this year in our Stewardship Month is to measure what matters in our lives. Measuring what matters in our lives, because hopefully we are using God's form of measurement when it comes to this matter of stewardship, because stewardship is a matter of the heart, and it starts with exactly that, of how we view our finances. The first sense that any of us ever get when something is in our life is normally the sense of sight. That's not true of every particular thing, but when it comes to finances, a lot of times that is particularly true. We see something that we want. And we see something that we want. I particularly like shoes. There's a lot of things that I like in this world that speak to my flesh. I like to wear Jordans and Nikes and those particular things. I'm still of that particular age, and I see a pair of shoes that maybe I like, and I think, you know what, I want to get those pairs of shoes. And my mind immediately goes to, well, how can I get the money in order to prudently buy these pair of shoes? Do I need these pair of shoes? Do I have to have these pair of shoes? No, the answer is always no to that. But if I was to have those things, now, are having those shoes, is having nice cars, is having a nice house, is having a large financial portfolio, are all those things wrong? I don't believe that's the case either. But rather it is getting our finances in proper perspective to God. Today, we're going to be going through the book of Proverbs. Now, the book of Proverbs many times is equated with having wisdom and getting knowledge and understanding, and that is where we would send. That's where I read when it comes to wisdom and knowledge and understanding. Obviously, all of the Bible helps increase in all of those things. But as the writer of Proverbs is speaking, he speaks to wisdom a lot. And Solomon, we know, is outside of Jesus, was given a supernatural wisdom from the Lord, and he used that. But the fact is when it comes to this matter of the dollar bill or the $20 bill, as I have in my hand, a lot of times it gets out of perspective. Not everything focuses correctly when this becomes involved in our lives. Now, that doesn't mean that this should not exist in our lives. In fact, the Bible gives several examples of being good stewards of what God has given us and increasing in those things that God has given us. And I think, and I believe, and I don't want you to hear me wrong or the message wrong over the next few weeks. It is not wrong to plan fiscally. It is not wrong to accumulate wealth. It is not wrong to have maybe more wealth than someone else. None of those things are wrong, unless our heart is also wrong in the midst of that. And today we're going to start in that thought of how do I view my finances properly? Because I want to view my finances like God views my finances. You know, He has a view, and everything in this world that we view should be from the biblical point of view. Sometimes maybe you have a favorite sports team, and this coming Sunday is the Super Bowl, and maybe you're a Chiefs fan, maybe you're an Eagles fan, and depending on who you think is going to win, if you're a Chiefs fan, I know several Chiefs fans, and you say, oh yeah, they're going to win. They have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and all these other guys, and somebody else might say, well, you're viewing those from your Chiefs fan view, and you have on the fan goggles, and it's obscuring your view. Well, the fact is everything a Christian views should be done from the viewpoint of a biblical perspective. You know, most people, when they talk about wealth, when they talk about money, they view it in a very, very much a primary goal of a person's life. And I have 4 daughters, and can I tell you, I want to take care of them. And not just do I want to take care of them, I want to give them everything that their little hearts desire. And I love being able to do things that are extra for them. And I think that is the innate desire of every parent. In fact, it's the desire of God as our Father. The Bible, Jesus gives us that illustration, and He tells us that we then, basically being wicked, and not that we're wicked, but being humans, if you have that desire, how much more so does your Heavenly Father desire to give us these things? But yet God does not promise the world's view of wealth in our life. You know, we don't very much here at Beacon Baptist Church. We do not believe in a prosperity gospelism that our if we have the nicest house in the church, the nicest car in the church, and the most expensive clothing in the church, that just means that God is blessing that person. I don't believe that at all. And I don't think the Bible teaches that at all. But we must view our finances properly. Unfortunately, many Christians, and that's really who I'm speaking to through these lessons, is, we turn our money, our finances, our wealth into a virtual God in our lives. We end up sacrificing things in our lives that we would never want to sacrifice for money. Our integrity, our loved ones, our principles, we end up sacrificing them to gain riches. And what the world views as right is what is profitable, and that's not how God views. God doesn't look at the profit of something and be like, well, just because it makes a profit, then it must be right. No, we must view right as righteous. Regardless of wealth gained, it is never enough to most people, and lives are wasted in this endless pursuit of financial wealth here on this earth, this endless pursuit of gold and silver. Now, once again, don't get me wrong. This isn't to say that we're not supposed to work hard. We're going to talk about all those things today, but we must keep them in their proper view. And God warns His people of the deceptiveness of riches and calls them to view finances wisely. Viewing finances according to a biblical point of view. Always valuing our relationship with Him above our relationship with our pocketbook. The Solomon here, he notes God's principle for personal values, for financial management. And if we heed those things according to the Bible, God's people can certainly start viewing our finances in a godly and biblical perspective. That is certainly what I want in my life, and I hope that is what you want in your life. And then today, we're going to answer these 4 questions. And maybe you have these questions in your own life. The first question that we're going to ask is, what are some examples of true wealth? What are some examples of true wealth? What is it that we think when it comes to true wealth? Do we think of the richest man on earth, Elon Musk? Or do we view that in regards to a biblical perspective? What is the proper balance of material possessions with a wise believer might seek from God? And what is that perfect balance in which we might seek God, but also have enough to care for our family and use wisdom with our finances? How much of our stuff or wealth should be used to honor the Lord? And we want to answer that question. And how did the writer contrast honest and dishonest ways of obtaining money? Because there certainly is a way that Christians should not obtain money, and there's a way that Christians should maintain money. And once again, we want to do all these things in a biblical perspective. The first thing that we're going to see here is a wise perspective, having a wise perspective. And in these lessons, what we're going to do is, once again, we want to view our finances through a biblical lens. And so we're going to use the Bible verse by verse, and we're going to take and see what the Bible says about these subjects using a wise perspective. The Bible says in Proverbs 22:4. Once again, we'll be in the book of Proverbs. We'll use several different verses. Feel free to highlight or write these down and go back and read them later, highlight them later. Proverbs 22:4 says, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. You know, wise believers understand that humility rather than self-indulgence, right? Because most of the time, that's what this is all about in our life, is what can I do for myself? But rather, humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. And once again, the Christian, the wise believer understands that humility rather than self-indulgence produces lasting benefits. That's my wise perspective on viewing my finances correctly. And it starts with that, is that I understand that I should not be measured on how many of these I have in my bank account, but rather be measured by the humility and the fear of the Lord. Now, this fear of the Lord does not mean a cowering fear of the Lord, but rather that awe or reverence of the Almighty, meaning I have much greater respect for God than I do my wealth, than I do how much of these that I might have. Once again, having these is not wrong. It's not wrong. But if these get in front of God, then your perspective gets out of line, and destruction is certain to come in someone's life, the Christian's life that see that. And so we're even able to answer that question, that first question that we see of what are some examples of true wealth. What is it? True wealth is one that has humility. True wealth is one that has wisdom. True wealth is one that has a proper fear of the Lord. Proverbs 28:20 tells us that a faithful man shall abound with blessing, but he that maketh haste to be rich shall not be innocent. And so we understand that one of the things that is about having true wealth is just that. It's that matter of faithfulness. It's faithfulness. Can I ask, and I understand once again that these are very pointed topics when it comes to finances, that do you desire to be faithful to God more than you desire to earn as many of these as possible? I hope our desire. Now listen, I'm talking to myself too. As our preacher says, anytime, pointing a finger why he's preaching, that there might be one pointed out there to the audience, but there's three pointed back at him. That's the same thing for me. I'm teaching to myself today as well. Is that I hope that I desire faithfulness, understanding that faithfulness is much greater than any sort of pursuit of wealth that is here on this earth. Chapter 16 and verse 16 tells us things that we should treasure. How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver? What he's saying here is we are to chase after wisdom and understanding, trying to acquire those things in our life rather than trying to constantly attain gold and silver. Wisdom is the knowledge of God's ways. And to have wisdom is a godly attribute because it is knowledge of who God is and how he does things. Understanding is the ability to apply God's wisdom in our daily life, and how many times Christians lack these two things of of wisdom and understanding. Why? Why should a Christian ever lack wisdom and understanding? And I know in my life, I do at times too. It's many times it's because we get an improper view of what matters most in our life, and we chase after these things instead of chasing after wisdom and understanding, which comes from the Lord. And we're supposed to chase after these things rather than chasing after gold or silver, which can be lost or stolen, and which at best provide very temporary satisfaction. Here, Solomon goes on to say in chapter 23 of verse 4 and 5 says, labor not to be rich, cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. It's understanding that, once again, we are quick to give our attention to getting rich. And if we only give our attention to acquiring as much of this as possible, really what this turns into is a worship of this. I don't ever want to be guilty of worshiping money, currency, more than worshiping God. But the fact is if I give my attention more to this and my eyes are fixed on this all the time, then my eyes will never be fixed on things that matter. Things that should matter most in a Christian's life. A wise perspective on money is to not to get as much as we possibly can, and that be our primary focus, but rather to even meet the needs that we might have. Chapter 30, verse 7 through 9 says, 2 things have I required of thee, deny me them not before I die. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain. The desire to attain any sort of wealth should be a desire to have that, to provide for one's family. And once again, it shouldn't be a desire to have as much as this as possible. In fact, the proverb uses wisdom and says, if I have more than I can possibly handle, and many people, that is true. Once again, I am for every person to have as much wealth as they can and as they can honor God with. But the fact is that many people who attain massive amounts of wealth, not every person, but many people that obtain these things end up depending solely on this for everything that they need. And instead of seeking the Lord in prayer for a burden, for something in their life, they go straight to their pocketbook instead of to God, which means their perspective, their view of finances has been skewed by the things of this world. But he also goes on to say that, if I'm poor, then I might have this fleshly desire to steal and obtain riches in a way that does not honor God. And that's not good either. And so he's giving us these verses as an understanding that I want to work hard, we'll talk about that in a minute, and to attain finances so that I can provide for my family, understanding that all these things come from God. A wise perspective on finances places more value on faith, humility, wisdom, and understanding rather than on gold or silver. Believers are to avoid this trap of making wealth their goal in life. Once again, that's not a Christian's goal, or it should not be a Christian's goal. We must keep it in a proper perspective. Wealth must be subordinate to and secondary and controlled by being obedient to the Lord. If in your life you can't have this with also having obedience to God, then maybe we need less of this. And you understand what I'm saying? It is, we must not trust in this. Our trust must be in God. Okay? A wise perspective. Secondly, a wise purpose. A wise purpose. Chapter 3, verse number 9 says, honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. The highest purpose for material goods is to honor the Lord. Once again, many of us are familiar with the biblical concept of tithing. It means 10%, and giving the 10% to the local church. And we shouldn't just be giving God our leftovers. That should be the first fruits of our giving. And he says the first fruits of the entire harvest is what he tells us to give towards. And this demonstrates our faith in God, that God will meet the person's needs based on the 90% left. And this shouldn't just be something that is, once again, I do it because I have to. Our pastor has talked about that legalistic view of giving, but rather we give because of love. Love is the ultimate motivator to give, and it is motivating the believer to give joyfully. Many people think that tithing is an Old Testament thing, whereas the Bible speaks to being a cheerful giver all throughout the New Testament, and so it is a godly thing. But the believer does not only honor the Lord with the first fruits, but he honors the Lord with all possessions, seeking to glorify God with every single thing that he has. Why? How does a believer do that? He realizes that God is the source of everything. And Christians honor the Lord by how they earn money, by how they use that money for right purposes and righteous purposes. And so that's what God is saying here in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 9 and 10. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. And then many times people take that and think, well, you know what? That means that God's going to make every person that gives rich. And we, once again, because we have an improper view of riches, we think that just means that he's going to make us financially wealthy. No, rather it means that we won't have needs that need to be met. God is certain to supply our needs. God promises that if we are faithful to him, that he is going to be faithful to us. And I know that to be true because it has been true even in my own life. Chapter 11, verse 28 tells us, he that trusteth in his riches shall fall, but the righteous shall flourish as a branch. And material wealth is not good or bad in nature. Once again, it's in of itself. How much of this you have is not good or bad. Rather, it is how one uses the money. Our trust, once again, is to be placed in the Lord and not in riches. If our trust is properly placed, we will flourish in ways that truly matter. Once again, this won't be the God in our life. God will be God in our life. And anything that we have in regards to wealth will be subservient to who we worship and who we obey. Chapter 16 and verse 8 tells us, better is a little with righteousness than great revenue without right. And once again, it's that thought for a Christian of, if I have a wise purpose for my money, and I understand that if I have these huge revenue sources, but yet they are founded and have very unrighteous tactics and unrighteous ways, that it would be much better to have fewer and be right with God than have much and be dishonest with what you have. The Bible tells us in chapter 28, verse 6, better is the poor that walketh in his uprightness than he that is perverse in his ways, though he be rich. This Proverbs, once again, continues to contrast what was stated here in verse 8 of chapter 16. But it's in order to have real wealth, believers should daily exhibit integrity. We should never, as Christians, give up our integrity, all for the sake of gaining more of this. If we do that, we have viewed our finances improperly. We view finances completely improperly. We must trust in God and have grace in those things. And then lastly, not just a wise perspective, not just a wise purpose, but also be wise in practice. Wise in practice. Chapter 13 and verse 11 says, wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. The love of money, and I've seen this to be true, whether it be new Christians or some of what should be the most mature Christians. This can be true of spiritual leaders. It can be true of anyone, that the love of money has led some people to lose their integrity by cheating, by outright fraud, by lying. And if that is the way that someone has gained their wealth, the Bible says that it is certain to diminish. You say, but it doesn't seem that way. It seems like the people that do those things constantly get ahead. The Bible is very clear that, many times we see these people that have an abundance of wealth, and yet they are miserable in their life. What diminished in their life? Joy. Joy diminished in their life. They have no joy because they can't even be happy in all the things that they have gotten, because they have gotten it by ways that are ungodly and are untrue. We contrast with the loss of this honest gain is the expectation that the person who earns an honest living through labor will multiply. And Bible tells us, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. Once again, this is not a promise to be rich, but rather that when you work for something and you earn something, there is much greater joy in that. Chapter 15, verse number 27 says, he that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house, but he that hateth gifts shall live. Not only does dishonest gain vanish in the end, but eventually it also troubles the household. I hope that I love my children more than I love dishonest gain. And how many people have destroyed their homes because of an addiction to gambling, an addiction to things that can be used by improper perspective on their finances. The Bible is so very clear that he that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house. Chapter 20, verse 17 says, bread of the sea is sweet to a man, but afterward his mouth shall be filled with gravel. And those things might seem sweet for a little bit, but eventually it turns into something that is hard to digest, and it's taken away from us when the consequences eventually come forth. We probably have all read of somebody that had great wealth that attained it by improper ways, and eventually they lost everything. Lost their families, lost their finances, lost their freedom, whatever it may be. Why? Because the Bible is always true. We must view these things on a biblical perspective. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 6 says, the getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a vanity tossed to and fro of them that seek death. Can I tell you that the Bible even gives wisdom to the Christian salesman? I hope that maybe you do sales, and I hope that in the matter of your daily business, that you are honest and true, because that is what God has called each and every one of us to be. I don't want to have a testimony, and the Lord allowed me to be in sales for a little bit. I never want to have a testimony of telling lies in order to get gain, but rather to gain things based on truth. On truth. A lying tongue to trick people out of their hard-earned money. It's just inconceivable when we really think about it in regards to being Christ-like. The Bible tells us that whoso robbeth his father or his mother and saith it is no transgression, the same as the companion of destroyer, is eventually one who has an improper view of this, is even willing at times to sell out or to deceive their own parents. And doing that, and they are in the companion of the destroyer. The Bible tells us that he that oppresseth the poor to increase his riches. All these ways of having a practice of dishonesty in order to increase in money, that is not the biblical perspective. Believers should value integrity over finances. As Christians follow biblical practices in earning a living, they will strive to use their assets to care for people. Such honest use of resources honors the Lord, and it blesses his people. We asked those questions earlier. What were those questions? The first one was, what are some examples of true wealth? The Bible tells us that real wealth comes from humility and includes honor, life, and the reverential fear of the Lord, getting wisdom and understanding. What is the proper balance of material possession which a wise believer might seek from God? Well, the writer tells us that we should neither seek wealth nor poverty, for both lead to temptation to turn from God. How much of our stuff or wealth should be used to honor the Lord? All of it. The Bible says with all of our increase, with all of our fruits, with all of our possessions, we should honor the Lord. And how did the writer contrast honest and dishonest ways of obtaining money? Dishonest means of gaining wealth are doomed to failure. But those who earn their living by honest labor will see their efforts multiplied. I want to view my finances properly. I want to be wise in perspective, wise in purpose, and wise in practice. I want, with my finances, to follow after Jesus Christ and do His will. And I hope that that is your same heart's desire.